Giovanni probably did more for the development of Chinese medicine in the West than any other single individual. When I posted the news of his death on the Journal of Chinese Medicine Facebook page, there was an extraordinary outpouring of shock and grief from thousands of students and practitioners who used his books on a daily basis, were lucky enough to attend his lectures, and who loved and respected him. Giovanni was born in Naples in 1945, the youngest of 4 children. At the age of 8, his uncle gave him the nickname of the Professor because of his serious manner. Though by the time he was in his 20s, he was also known for his radical left-wing politics, great parties, and skill at making weird and wonderful cocktails. His love of a good time stayed with him throughout his life, and a passion for cowboy movies, football, music, and particularly in his later years for salsa dancing. Giovanni took a degree in economics in Naples, and then, deciding not to join his father's successful construction business, moved to the UK to work for Fiat, the Italian car company. Like many of us, he first encountered acupuncture because of his own health problems, in this case, his case, disabling migraines. Somebody advised acupuncture, and perhaps because he'd been fascinated by Chinese culture from a very early age, he went for treatment. This ignited a passion for Chinese medicine, and in 1971 he embarked on a 3-year course with Dick Van Buren. He was one of the first Western practitioners to take advantage of the opening up of study opportunities in China, attending a 3-month course in Nanjing in 1980. The depth and sophistication of Chinese medicine that he encountered there was a revelation to him, as the prevalent opinion at the time, especially in the UK, was that China had abandoned its rich medical tradition. He developed deep relationships with his Chinese teachers and returned to Nanjing several times. In 1996, Giovanni was appointed visiting professor at Nanjing University of TCN. That was a great and unusual honour. And the college described him as the father of Chinese medicine in Europe. Already a multilinguist, speaking English, Italian, French, Finnish, and Spanish, Giovanni taught himself Chinese and began his extraordinary writing career. Over the subsequent years, he produced one seminal textbook after another: Tongue Diagnosis in Chinese Medicine, Foundations of Chinese Medicine, The Practice of Chinese Medicine, Diagnosis in Chinese Medicine, Obstetrics and Gynecology in Chinese Medicine, The Channels of Acupuncture, and finally, reflecting what became his overarching passion in his last few years of writing and research, The Psyche in Chinese Medicine. Many of these were completed in the house he bought on Italy's Amalfi Coast, among the famous lemon groves. Giovanni lectured all over the world, both in person and online. He was unstinting in his support of his patients, students, and fellow practitioners, and was known for his generous responses to those who contacted him for advice from all over the world. He's sorely missed by the Chinese medicine community. He's teaching in my last year at college, and the great good fortune that I had to be able to join his trip to China in 1981 with springboards to my own career in Chinese medicine. I owe him an enormous debt, and am proud that we became both close colleagues and friends.
I'm Richard Blackwell, and I'm principal of the Northern College of Acupuncture in York. And Giovanni was one of my very greatest teachers. I learned a huge amount from him about Chinese medicine, a huge amount of information, but also a lot about how to behave as a teacher, and how to encourage people, and how to have a kind of quiet authority, which he really projected. And we'll all miss him hugely, of course.
It's good to see so many people here to honor a great man, but I'm pretty certain that if Giovanni was witnessing this gathering, he would wonder what all the fuss is about. He was very humble despite his incredible knowledge of Chinese medicine and his huge body of work. Yet if anybody challenged his opinions or theories, it disturbed him deeply. I got to know the many facets of this amazing man by spending time with him, considerable time, in the UK, in Italy, and in California. In 2004, he bought a house near Amalfi in Italy. That provided a haven for him to write and enjoy the beautiful surroundings. This was the area he spent many wonderful childhood holidays on the beach with his mother, so it was his spiritual home. The house was 300 steps up a mountainside, surrounded by lemon trees on terraces, and with an incredible view of the sea. Here he spent many hours in quiet contemplation or writing. When he was on his own, he often spent weeks up at his house, working diligently and living on the produce that grew in the garden. His last stay in Italy was the summer of 2016. When I visited him, he was complaining of lower back pain. So I gave him numerous acupuncture treatments. That relieved the pain temporarily, but by the next day, the pain was back. He had been diagnosed with multiple myeloma 6 years earlier, but had had no symptoms until then. His worst fears were confirmed when he returned to Santa Barbara later that summer. Luckily for him, Santa Barbara has a cancer center of excellence, so he had the benefit of the best possible treatments, including immunotherapy drugs. He bore his illness with incredible courage. He sought out the top consultants, and he had every possible scan and treatment available. He also had a larder full of Chinese, Western, and Ayurvedic herbs, which he took by the fistful. He ate only organic, gluten-free food and all homemade. So if there was something that might help fight his disease, he did it. I visited him several times during the last year of his life. It was very hard to watch his decline in health. But despite his illness and his accompanying disabilities, he was still making videos, maintaining his courses, and promoting the three treasures. He was unable to stop working, and his spirit was strong. The great man is gone, but his rich legacy lives on.
When I think of him, three attributes particularly come to mind. The first is his humanity, the second, his clarity, and thirdly, I'm sure everybody will say, his total commitment to Chinese medicine. He was my role model, and I just loved the way, if ever there was a question, if ever there was anything that needed answering, he could just come out with the answer. There it was. And I really aspired to be like him. He was really the person I wanted to be like because he was so amazing at being able to teach with such clarity.
I went to him for herbs, and one day I went in, and he simply did not look good to me. And I had to say something, "Are you okay?" And basically he described some of his activity, which was getting up, I can't remember the actual details, but getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, writing for 3 hours, and then having breakfast, and then seeing patients. And at the time, I thought I was a hard worker, but I kind of thought, I don't think I was up to that. And when you look at his output of books, I was just fantasizing a few minutes ago, if all those books disappeared off the shelves in this country, every country in the world, Chinese medicine would kind of halt.
I think I just want to express my utter gratitude for his endless curiosity. that he brought, and he inspired me to be curious and not to accept anything and to try and think differently. So I just having immense gratitude for that.
I first met Giovanni many, many years ago at the School of Acupuncture. When I met him, there was an instant recognition, and I recognized him as a like soul. And over the years, our friendship grew, and I spent many happy times with him, both in London at the beginning and later on at his beautiful house on the Amalfi Coast. I'm here as his friend because I love him so much, and I'm sure he's here today. And he'll probably take time off from watching the World Cup, because I know football was his passion. Anyway, I just want to say I am so happy to have met Giovanni and count him as one of my very best friends. And I'm basically here just to express my love and gratitude towards him.
I was interested in what David said about that instantaneous recognition that he spoke of, because I had exactly the same experience with Giovanni. He came to me originally as a patient with an impossible... over the years, I tried treating Giovanni for a number of conditions. I failed on every single occasion. He didn't sleep. That was the main thing. He was so driven. You know, his driving force was apparent from that very moment I met him. And he was totally inspired me. And actually, he is responsible for my love of Chinese medicine. And I love him dearly as a brother in the same thing. He is such a wonderful inspirer, the word inspirer. And as a brain, sometimes you can fall in love with people's brains when you meet them. And I fell in love with Giovanni's brain. He was an extremely serious person, but he gave me rise to some of the greatest laughter I've ever had. I did train with him for a couple of years, which was a wonderful experience. In the middle of those couple of years, he came back from China and said, "Tear up everything I've taught you. I'm starting all over again." And off we went from the very beginning. And he inspired me to go to Nanjing. Giovanni was writing his first book when we went then in 1987. And I remember being given the manuscript. Actually, my background was that I'd been in publishing. And so it was fun sitting with him and helping him to edit the book. He didn't need any editing, actually. The fact that English was not his mother tongue never really appeared to be a problem. He was completely extraordinary in his fluency. And what was frightening was the quick way he learned to speak and read Chinese. I swear to God that he didn't read Chinese properly when we arrived in Nanjing. And 3 or 4 weeks into the course, one of the hospital doctors snatched a book out of his hands that was precious material on dermatology in Nanjing. And they didn't want him to read it, obviously, because they thought that their trade secrets were about to disappear. And Giovanni was just sitting there assimilating this book as fast as possible. You know, I once read that Mozart, going to St. Peter's, was able to listen to a wonderful concert and come straight out and write down the music that he'd heard. And I think Giovanni told me he had a photographic memory, and that was very apparent when I was with him. I'd been in many places where there were very clever people, at Oxford University and so on and so forth. I've never seen anybody assimilate material and be able to make sense of it and come back with the essence or core of it as an explanation so well. And I find it very hard to think that he's not here now. I miss him terribly. And I don't blame people for crying. He's a terrible loss, actually. And Giovanni, wherever you are in the universe, I wish you well in the forthcoming lives you may have. And may we all send you our love so that you can continue your life's work. Because I believe wherever you are, you will continue to do what you've done so well, which is inspire and heal and explain. What a wonderful man. Thank you so very much.
Usually a death in the family is a private affair, but as I found out in the case of my father, His passing has been mourned by thousands of acupuncturists all over the world, and there's been memorials in Melbourne, Berlin, Toronto, Santa Barbara, and other places, and I've received many emails from acupuncturists expressing their sadness and their gratefulness for the contribution my father's work had to their careers and their understanding of Chinese medicine. Yeah, it's strange to share my grief with so many of you. I mean, I obviously recognise a lot of you, but many of you are new faces to me, and but it kind of helps me reconcile that although his life was taken by cancer at a relatively young age, to see the impact he's had on your lives is really, really touching, and I'm very proud of that. When I think back to my childhood, I have a lot of memories of him working at his computer, writing. There was stacks of paper everywhere, so they have a very personal connection for me. And just in case you're interested, I donated his library of Chinese books and all his books to the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine in San Diego. Not only for practical reasons, obviously he was living in Santa Barbara, but I thought it's good that future generations of students can benefit and use his books to carry on. I just jotted down a few memories of Giovanni. As, you already know him as the acupuncturist, and I thought I'd just share a few memories of my childhood about him as the father. First thing, he actually rarely spoke about Chinese medicine privately. Our conversations invariably spanned many topics, including history, politics, philosophy, culture, music, football, psychology, and technology. Chinese medicine was his life's work, but he had many interests actually outside of that, particularly Jungian psychology, which became a large source of inspiration for his book, The Psyche in Chinese Medicine. He also had a creative side. He wasn't just an academic. His hobbies included painting and music. He played the piano and the guitar, two instruments which he encouraged me to learn as a child. His music interests spanned early folk music, such as Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie, blues music from the likes of Leadbelly, but in later life he increasingly liked classical music and opera, particularly Beethoven. I think he had classical FM playing in the background 24/7, whether it be in his study or his home all the time. And interestingly, I was listening to an audio lecture of his on YouTube where he was talking about the crescendo and decrescendo of Beethoven's music, mirroring the rising and falling of qi, which I thought was quite interesting. Yes, it's been said in later life he became very interested and passionate really about dancing salsa. He took it very seriously and practiced it feverishly. Peter noted the salsa parties that he used to hold in Santa Barbara. What he didn't say was actually the police had to come around at one point to tell everyone to go home because the music was so loud and going on for so long. He loved film, not Hollywood blockbusters, but more creative film. He loved independent films, works such as Cinema Paradiso, but he also liked Walt Disney animated films like The Aristocats, which he loved, and The Jungle Book, and he even wrote his own film script called The Bardo State, which was another aspect. Like all Italians, he drove extremely fast. I made the mistake I used to play golf as a child, and I made the mistake of inviting him one day to join me, and he got into the golf buggy, and he obviously didn't respect any of the rules or the etiquette of golf, and was driving as fast as the thing would take him over all the greens and the bunkers, much to the annoyance of all the other golfers. That was the last time I asked him to drive that. He was predominantly a reserved and introverted individual, but he did have an extroverted side which came out when he hosted house parties. He knew quite a few Italian drinking games, which usually came up at Christmas or when he had house parties in Santa Barbara. And it's also worth noting that he loved English culture, which is, I think, one of the reasons which brought him here in the first place. He loved English humour. He loved following English politics. His favourite English TV shows were Men Behaving Badly, One Foot in the Grave, Mr. Bean and Blackadder. He loved Sunday roasts, he loved eating goose at Christmas, and especially Christmas pudding. So we often forget he was Italian, but he really embraced English language and culture. Yeah, he was working up to the last moment before the dying process began. He was answering emails to do with customers asking about his online courses. He couldn't bear that someone was waiting for a certificate. So he really worked up to the last moment. And yeah, he died on the 9th of March, 2:50 a.m. local time. And in the end, what he achieved in Chinese medicine wasn't the be-all and end-all for him, actually. He said it was more important to be a decent person than a high achiever, and he actually appreciated the good qualities in people rather than their achievements themselves, and I thought that's gives you an insight to who he was. So yeah, that's it. And thank you very much again. I'm really humbled for you to all come here to pay respect to Giovanni. Thank you.
Good morning, Giovanni, and thank you for being part of our interview. To get started, where are we right now?
We are in Pontone, on the Amalfi Coast in Italy.
And how long have you been in this place in Pontone?
8 years. I bought a house here 8 years ago.
And how do you feel when you come here?
It's very relaxing, and it's a wonderful combination of relaxation and work, because it's a great place to write.
What sort of writing do you do when you're here?
When I come here, I'm usually by a coincidence in the late stages of finishing a book. So I've actually finished writing my last 2 books here, the one on the psyche and the one on the channels.
And so, Giovanni, given your prolific contribution to the area of Chinese medicine, what's your greatest achievement?
What is my greatest achievement? It's not up to me to say, really. I think I hope that it is adapting Chinese medicine to Western patients, but keeping its roots. I was giving the commencement speech at the doctoral course graduation in the United States recently, and I identify that as connecting heaven and earth. By heaven, I mean developing Chinese medicine to Western patients in ways that are different than they are from the classics. And by earth, I mean keeping its roots, however, not keeping our feet on the ground. And I hope that's something I've managed to achieve.
And what are you passionate about?
What am I passionate about? Salsa.
I have a final question for you. If you weren't a Grand Master of Chinese medicine, what would you be doing?
If I weren't a Grand Master of Chinese medicine, well, first of all, I wouldn't describe myself as a Grand Master. And I would probably be a Grand Master of salsa dancing. That would be my choice.
That's wonderful.
Oui, monsieur Giovanni, oui, monsieur.